Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
My plan, here's just my plan, but I have a plan, is to read a little bit from my article in Queer Dharma, set it up a little and talk about it, and the process of writing it. And then if we have time, since my other major interest is in somatic-oriented psychotherapy, is to do a guided somatic, experientially based experience to see if we can translate some of what my teacher has given me into actual experience. So if there's no real complaints about that, let's go ahead and do that. Is that okay? Alrighty. I must, of course, acknowledge Winston, who is the editor of the book, the second series, and with whose invitation I was forced to try and set this stuff down into logical, cohesive writing, which is not my forte. I'm not even logical when I'm at home by myself, let alone when I'm trying to write something, and it's quite a difficult process. And to make it even more difficult, Winston set me a task, well, we together set a task, where I would try and summarise Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism in 10 pages, and then go ahead and talk about my experience of being my teacher in 10 pages. Obviously, I was insufficient at both tasks, as one would be. And now when I reread it, I recognise that there are so many shortcuts in it and comparatively spurious information, but I also see that the intent to try and get a form of a 10 or probably 15-year experience of what has come out of my time with my teachers has also been useful, and I hope it's useful for other people. Just as a sort of general idea of what I met a guy named Joshua Rinpoche. I mean, he was my 4-door down neighbour who sometimes wore gowns and cloaks and stuff, and other times was just in shorts doing the lawn. You know? So I didn't know that all this other stuff until, of course, I was bonded or connected to him, and then up it arose, and I struggled then for a number of years, and still struggle with a number of years, to try to make an understanding of what probably 12 centuries of Buddhist concentrated thinking has happened in Tibet distills out to in a relationship with a gifted and enlightened master. From a sort of average Australian, reasonably well-educated person's point of view, and I can say it is quite, and still is quite an adventure, and I'm very different because of that experience, and because of the experience with other teachers thereafter. He is probably embodied, but left the body that I knew in 1992, so I haven't seen him for a while, but his presence has remained pretty strong. So it was a strange sort of relationship, because it wasn't the formal relationship that often happens with Tibetan teachers or with masters. And I remember one day in the kitchen, a story that I've told here before, after learning that there was Buddhism, and Dzogchen was very fashionable in Australia at the time, so like a fool I ran up to him and said, we doing Dzogchen? We are. Is that what we're doing? And he said, no, we're doing starting. It's called starting is what we're doing. So I was very naive. And so maybe what I will start with is in that first 10 pages, a little bit about how I view the whole Buddhist Vajrayana cosmology, if you like. And then I'll move a little bit further into the personal aspects of the relationship with him. Already by the time we get here in the article, I've talked about how precious the reincarnated masters are and what the process has been to sort of hone their skill over 12 centuries or so. So now I attempt to talk about how I see the whole mishmash of everything. In the beginning, there was the combined sentience of us all, and all of us, one of us, a number of us, some of us, there really wasn't any us. You can't really even talk about it. Somehow, there was a formation of a thought which immediately created samsara, which is everything that we apparently experience. And then inevitably the sentience itself divided into hunks, and the hunks divided into bodies. Once you start making form, the rest is the natural course of what's going to happen. If the last hunk of samsara was to awaken, samsara would go away. The Tibetans don't expect that to ever happen. They don't seem to feel that thinking this is at all going to help anyone or be helpful in any way. Rinpoche talked as though this is the field in which we are currently working and this is how it is now. But helping and progress are possible. Everyone is going to progress anyway, progress beyond samsara. What Tibetan Buddhists are doing is speeding the process along and trying to make it less uncomfortable. Once you've taken a body, you're stuck with limitations. In Vajrayana Buddhism, we strive to accept that we are all this way. How to deal with your attachments, expectations, the lack of compassion are the main foci of Vajrayana Buddhism. There are things you can do to help yourself, given that being embodied means that you will have preferences and desires, that your body requires things to be one way rather than another. Some people like noise, some people don't like noise, some people like cold, some people like hot. That doesn't feel like a choice, but it is a preference of the organism. And some people, when their preferences aren't met, have many difficulties, obsessions, obstacles arise and take up a lot of their energies. They don't allow them to be available, at least consciously, to the process of awakening. They experience too much involvement in their own feelings that their house is wrong or the temperature's wrong or the noise is intrusive. You can name thousands and thousands of such preferences. And we function as though these limitations on how kind... We function as though there are limitations on how kind we can be to ourselves and each other. Our unkindness is generated by the sense of self-preservation that comes with the body. So being bad to each other is a direct result of fear. We don't want to accept that, but accepting that is part of waking up. The ultimate cure for all of this is enlightenment. Until we attain that, intermediary aids make up a large part of the Buddhist knowledge base. But they are all secondary to the goal of actually waking up. Tibetan Buddhism talks about techniques one can use to include these difficulties and not just say, get over it. Really, don't activate it. Don't give any energy to it. Don't spend any time with it. Tibetans are more pragmatic than that. Tibetans understand that really the issue is to do something without taking any interest in your own jealousies or needs or wants, just to practice kindness. Once you include things like emotional states, attachment states, energetic states, body needs, Buddhism makes it easier for you at first. But if you formulate an enlightened intention, coupled with the intention to be helpful to others, it slowly becomes harder again because there's no hiding place. And then the real work begins. Okay. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about the segue into the actual relationship with my teacher. One of the important things to keep in mind, connected with the notion of attachment, is that everything is always changing. That's the nature of it all, from the Buddhist point of view. You never put the same hand in the same stream. It's always new water, new sensation, a new hand. Everything is impermanent. We're on the wheel, we're in the process of being reborn, we're in the process of dying. Nothing is going to stay stable. Our belief that there is stability is purely a trick of the mind. It's a delusion. It's an attachment in that we want to have either control or understanding or whatever we decide that will stop us from being frightened and allow us to keep the world still so that we feel more comfortable. But that's not the nature of the actual world. So we keep reminding ourselves that nothing ever happens twice. And what you think is happening isn't happening because you only see a small piece of the puzzle. You are the blind person who touches the elephant at one end and thinks it's the whole elephant. When you think you know what's going on, you really don't. You only know a piece of what's going on, and that piece may be infinitesimal, 1 pixel in the whole big picture. No matter how right you've got it, you haven't gotten it right. And that's an important but pretty disturbing piece of information. Another important information is that the universe is changing all the time. Then there are many possibilities you haven't even considered. The shorthand version is that just about everything is possible at any one moment. The third thing that's useful to know is that Buddha is not strained. He's not pushed. He doesn't create anything. He doesn't make any effort. He is, however, uncomfortable because there is discomfort. But that's not made into a problem. So add all these three things up in terms of your path. Continually recognize that everything is changing and what you think is happening isn't happening and that everything is possible. And at that point, just relax. Of course, if you could do that and hold these pieces together, you would move very quickly. And that's what Tibetan Buddhism is trying to help us to do. Now I'd like to give you some idea of my relationship with Rinpoche and how he helped me with this. I can only talk about it in terms of what he has done for me, this particular body-mind. So the stories are somewhat personal and don't necessarily generalise. That's always the case. Guru interactions are always very specific. Generalisations about them tend to be wrong. I would go so far as to say that there's no single individual purpose in Buddhism. There are a lot of books about living a life that doesn't get you into too much trouble, learning to notice what is and isn't good for you, all kinds of strictly relative goals. But as far as I can tell, there is only very few people for whom the serious consideration is to awaken right now. My relationship with Rinpoche was specific to my path, and at the same time gives some of the flavour of being in relationship with a guru. It's different from other relationships. He opened me to the idea of possibility itself. It took me time to let myself to accept that idea, that the world and myself and this lifetime weren't as limited as I supposed. These days, if someone catches my attention because it's out of the ordinary, I look at the possibility that guru intervention, I look at it as a possible guru intervention at the same time as I look for an explanation such as I fucked up or someone was mean to me. I do this because the world has proven over and over again to be different than what I decide it is. That means I can't only trust my own, that I can't only trust my own perceptions and conclusions. I need to include the knowledge that I've been wrong before and that new information may be on its way to undo even my current beliefs. If I don't do this, I'll miss all the new information. I'll make myself feel upset, betrayed. Judgment will be my most common mistaken reaction. Remember that for Buddha, upset or discomfort does not equal a mistake. The practitioner is on the edge of becoming subversive. Being subversive is not an unusual position for gay men and women, particularly now for the gay culture. Although we're resistant to the idea, being homosexual has until recently been inherently subversive. That gives us gay men and lesbians stamina for the Dharma and the body of Buddhist knowledge. Okay. So, that's the article. Any comments or you want to talk about it? Reasonably intense, just reading it. You should have written it. Any thoughts or comments about it? Before we go.
Did you ever discuss with your teacher the subversive aspects of being gay and what were his thoughts on it?
I did. And in fact, not just with Joseph Rinpoche, but even more recently with His Holiness Drukchen, who was here at the beginning of this year. And, we need to preface this with the idea that gurus are not about making one comfortable. I tried to make that as clear as I could. So it's unlikely that a guru response is going to be one that says it's all okay, even if it is all okay. If that construction inside me makes me into a piece of concrete. So it was a place of very mobile and movable sort of experience. With my own teacher, he knew nothing of it much and did several unusual things. One is he clearly liked me very much. He insisted that I be what I was. But to other members of the Sangha, I'm not sure so that I would hear it, but I did. Would say things like, I don't understand this gay thing. Doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. And then when he came to, I live in Castro Street, so when he came to Castro Street, one of the things that preceded him, because, everyone who's around the guru is always looking after the guru, so everyone talks a lot about, poor guru this, poor guru that. The poor guru he's coming to a gay area and he was all confused and flustered and he hoped it was all right and he wouldn't be uncomfortable. He didn't ever show any of that to me. So that was the maelstrom around him. He seemed to me to be extraordinarily comfortable and very at ease with gay men. He did say to me directly, as other teachers have, that he was very pleased with the quality of students that he met here. He led me to believe, although didn't say it outright because he wouldn't, that there was something about gay men that, at least the ones he met, that made them somewhat better students or somewhat more available students. He seemed to be a little surprised with our availability to the practices and our ability to deal with him as a person and deal with the issues intelligently and confront them, whereas many of the students he had, especially in Tibet, but even so in India and in Malaysia and a little bit in Australia, people would get this sort of false, well, not false, but a sort of reverence for him that would, and then there would be rumours about, what would offend the guru. You mustn't have your feet near him, or you mustn't be taller than him, and there'd all be this stuff. And he would play with that, of course. He would create those rumours to some extent. And the gay men he met didn't bother. Basically didn't bother. And he really liked that. Well, I think he really liked that. I mean, I thought he really liked it. The feedback to me was he really liked it. But every time I thought I'd get comfortable with something, he would somehow organise for me not to settle it. I mean, I've told this story before. We had some lesbians in the car and we were driving to a puja, and they had the first time they'd met him, and he's been here for a couple of months, maybe 3 months already, and of course, as we do, they naively tapped him on the shoulder and said, what do the Tibetans think of lesbianism? And he said, well, we don't know very much about that, and all I can say is that there's been some gay activity in the monastery amongst the men, but there is absolutely no lesbianism in Tibet. Right. Now, what do you say? I mean, what do you say? Recently, here, His Holiness Drukchen was here, who is also a very good friend of John Giono's, has had many, many gay friends he's very close to. And we went out for lunch, and the discussion was about, Buddhism accepting coming out, saying it was okay to be gay and all that sort of stuff. And it was a heated sort of discussion. And he was very involved in the discussion, talking about it. But at the same time saying, that's just, you really can't expect His Holiness Sakya Trinzen to change, this very classical sort of change. I doubt whether that would be any different and stuff like that. So I sort of come in my own head to, I see that in your actions you're very pro-gay, you're very close to the men that are in your life, you're very accepting as me of gay, you're accepting of my partners, you're accepting of my lifestyle, that's all very true, but I see in somehow you're sort of not involved in it, and that allows you not to make pontification or whatever. The moment I made that thought pattern, he said, but it hurts me enormously that my friends are being hurt by this. It just blew me back out of the water. So he's pro-gay. So I drive him up into a country setting, and we're spending a lot of time together. We're talking about lots of things, being gay, all that sort of stuff, and he's engaged with it all. Then there's a student up north that he spends some time with, and she reports to me the day after that he said, I don't really understand about this gay stuff. It seems unnatural to me. Now, I know that bomb was planted. I understand that bomb was planted. And it's, the moment I get comfortable with it, but, you can say that about gay, but you can say that with these guys about just about anything that you start. I mean, every time I thought I understood what we were doing, it would be exploded. So I think this whole thing is far from written, and anything I say about it is probably wrong. But it does seem to me that at the individual, I have to say, my own personal experience at the individual level, they've been immensely supportive. And in fact, when I wrote in Queer Dharma 1, I became more gay in my experience with Josse Rinpoche, because his insistence that I do not compress or withhold from him was very strong. I found him very attractive. I was in love with him. I found him very attractive. And he would do things like, pick me out of a crowd of people to measure his inner leg for a pair of pants, or put on those tight bicycle shorts and rub his ass in front of me, He'd do that sort of stuff. And he'd chuckle and laugh while he was doing it. And it was pretty clear, I'm in love with, okay, so maybe he's a straight man, whatever they are, I'm not too sure, but maybe he's a straight man, I'm in love with a straight man. The possibility of agony is endless. Who has not had this agony? Who does not know it? And who doesn't know what you can manufacture in your own thinking about what they're doing to you? And so I'm old enough now, I'm not doing that shit, I'm not playing with that game, I'm not doing, that's not a defence you can use around them either. That wasn't okay. The attraction was there and necessary. It got transformed in my relationship with him. I am more solidly, more clearly gay than I have been any time in my life because of my interaction with them. And I really don't that much care about what they think, because that experience is here now. And I know he was part of making that experience. Now there's the whole other stuff, the political stuff and things like that, which I don't understand. But I don't understand why some of them drink. I don't understand lots about them.
You went into the subject that I was interested in asking about, which is, do you think that the relationship to the teacher, you're saying that gay men have it looks like a propensity for this practice, that it involves their ability to be in love with a man, that the teacher takes advantage of any naturally arising energetic system that's in the human being, and this particularly strong one, the ability to fall in love and be connected in that deep way, that may have been, in evolution, just to find a mate and to fall, get biochemically connected with somebody. But we have used that.
I don't think that that's the case. I do think that that's a great advantage for us. It's a great engine or pusher of what goes on. But to tell you the truth, straight people fall in love with these gurus. What is different about us is that we're used to examining the assumptions of the culture we live in. We've had that internal battle all our lives, and in fact what Guru Yoga seems to do is to whap those assumptions over and over the head, and we have a stamina for that. I think the love is what boils us and pushes us, but I see many straight people in a lot of pain because of this love, because they just can't get it. They just can't, and I've watched the teachers move closer to them in an attempt and move further away from them to stop the pain, because it just doesn't seem to move in the way that we sometimes can. Not that we've got a little bit of advantage in a way. And I think that's our job in the culture, to some extent, is to reflect the culture back to itself in a different way than the assumptions are. And I don't want to talk about straight people as though they're they, but they really are. Because the degree to which you buy the assumptions of the culture, it makes it more difficult for you to see certain things. And we have more of that vision. We're more capable of doing it.
Yeah, I just was going to follow a comment that sometimes you see a bumper sticker, on a pickup truck says, "Real men love Jesus."
Right.
And that just points out this difficulty that straight men have, and like in that religion, to love another man. And that, like you're saying, it doesn't really matter which side you come down as long as you're working on the material, but we have maybe a more direct initial.
Yeah, and part of it, from the shrinky side of stuff, part of it is it happens to us earlier. That sexual stuff arises between 3 and 5, so we're already starting to move away quite early in that piece, whereas straight people, when they start to have their rebellion, they have it at 14 and 15. We've already started our rebellion, if you like, if you want to call it that, but our movement away much earlier, so our ways of coping with this are much more stronger, if you like, and we're not so dependent in the same way. But, it's still difficult. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I'm interested in doing the experiential.
Oh, okay. Is it time now?
Well, we have 20 more minutes. So.
All right. Well, the more you do of it, the more you'll see whether it works or not, I guess. And that's what we're here to do. If we're going to do this. Little preamble for this. One of the things that the Tibetans like to do is exactly the opposite to what we in the West have decided we need to do to be better people. the whole thing about psychotherapy and all that is that we're, the onion stuff, and we're rings of the onion, and you peel the wings of the onion off and thereby learn more about yourself. Tibetans are much more in favour of we start at the front, in the middle, the very centre of the onion and move out, where we're much in favour of moving at the outside of the onion and moving in. Because the Tibetans are so much interested in moving at the centre of the onion, it's very disruptive to those rings of the onion. Those rings of the onion are the things that we use every day to say hi to each other and to look in the mirror and notice ourselves. So when Tibetans start to do stuff with you, or you start to do with them something on the really centre part, then there's a lot of disruption that happens. And the article speaks a little bit about that and what an uncomfortable process it is. However, since we don't have direct relationship with that centre part of ourselves that we can so easily know, maybe if we grew up in another culture, part of the values of other cultures is to look into those places. We don't do so much of that. We look at the outside much more, or the more superficial rings. We're not so practiced at it. I've been wondering how to help with this process without going all one side or all the other. We seem to need our rings basically just to get ourselves some food and function every day. But we can get really caught in those things and spend all our time with them and not nurture the central part of us, which is so essential to the change in Buddhism. So how are we going to go about trying to do both of these? So the guided imagery is an attempt to do that, distilled out of a little bit of practice, and it may not fit you, and it may not be something you want to do, but you may find it useful in this process, in that process. The other thing I want to say is that the Tibetans do a lot of ritual where they actually place inside you, in the centre parts of you, these seeds, if you like, that would be sitting in the middle of the onion. They'd be sitting right in the fertilest soil in the middle. And they're happy for them to take lifetimes or generations for these seeds to grow and push the onion in its way. And because of their culture, they have been very interested in doing it at the heart. Now, I happen to think for gay men that we've got some other stuff involved. And it's a little lower than the heart. So I'm thinking that maybe we should start down there. So with that in mind, let's see how you do. Notice that your butt is on something firm. Get yourself into whatever you consider to be alignment where there's a sort of connection between the top and the bottom, somehow. Until you can take it a little bit for granted that you've got a spine or you've got a connection between the top and the bottom. Because we're not going to talk about it much, but just any sitting practice has already helped you with this. I'm interested, and I want you to be interested in your arsehole. It's just a general interest of mine. And I want you to come down and see what you can notice about it. Any area around your arse, insides, outsides, and see what you can know about you. May I say about you as an arsehole, but I don't mean that really. But down there, down you come. Now, if you're able to not only notice the anal verge, if you like, but also the fact that it's held by structures all the way around, which are sort of part of your perineum, the things that stop you from falling out when you stand up. Not just the holding of your anal verge, but also that whole skin area. And if you move forwards, it's quite a long way in consciousness, but if you can move forwards, you'll come ultimately to your genitals, to your testicles. And if you can, you notice that. And what's sometimes a little bit more difficult, to move sideways out towards where your hips are, where the sort of cheeks of your butt and out towards where you're. Now that's actually a diaphragm. It's actually it's a set of it's skin, of course, and stuff like that. But also there's a muscle. There's a set of muscles under there, which is known as the perineal diaphragm. And if you want to notice it, you can practice whatever breathing cycle works for you, either breathing out or breathing in, and letting that part of your body between where your asshole is, where your hips are, where your genitals are, that rhomboid, come down to touch the thing you're sitting on. It's as though you were moving your hips apart because you're bringing that stuff down to touch onto whatever you're sitting on. Now that it's technically impossible to get very far with that, but you can get a sense of it as you either breathe out or breathe in. I like to do it as I breathe out. Some people like to do it as they breathe in. For those of you who want to be advanced, bouncing any seed syllable off this sensation is helpful. You can pick Om if you like. We're just going Om, trying to get Om. Om. You can do it by just imagining that it's happening. You can do it by the breathing. You can do it with the seed syllable, whichever works best for you. Or by rocking, if you want to do it by rocking. If we were to assume that this is the base of us, the bottom part of us, and from this made the base of a mountain, if you like, and that the mountain moves from that sort of square base or rhomboid base and starts to move up as a set of number of small peaks and valleys, so that it's not a particularly peaked mountain, it's more of a sort of flat mountain. And that the flat part of the mountain starts to arise between where our arsehole is at the front and our bladder is, our arsehole is at the back, the front of the arsehole at the back, and the back of the bladder or penis at the front. So what you're having is this little triangle wherein your prostate sits, between where your arsehole is, where your bladder is. There's a little prostatic triangle in there, which no one pays much attention to except us guys. We like it very much. And if you were to imagine that that there was a mountain arising, that's peak came up to where the level of the prostate is. Now this mountain is part of many different traditions. In Tibetan Buddhism it's called the body mandala. It's often referred to as Mount Sumeru, but these are just things that you may read sometime or may already know about. But what you notice between where the perineum is and where the top of the mountain is, because it moves sort of like a pyramid a little bit, like a triangle, there's space around it. And that space automatically becomes full of fluid. And so what you actually have, if you were to look from the top of you down, what you would see is just the top of the mountain, and it would look like an island in a sea. And you can design your island as you like, a big flat island if you like, have many peaks, you can have peaks and valleys and lakes and whatever. But in fact, the island goes all the way down to this triangle, but you won't see that from the top. What you will see from the top is the surrounding sea and the island. Now that's the island that is the centre of the onion. That's the island where the seeds go. That's the middle part. There are many advantages to having a middle part, many useful things. That's home, if you like, in Sogyal Rinpoche's book. That's where home is. That's where we come to. Now, one of the things that happens to us when we get distressed is we forget about our home. We forget about it. The whole point of going back and rebuilding this home or revisiting it or watching it form is simply a practice of there is a place in which there is home. Now, if this metaphor is useful for you, I suggest you use it as often as you like. Try not to have it only a useful metaphor in a particular place. If you do it easier when you do meditation or when you sit down or align yourself, fine. But it's okay to do while you're walking around. You could consider doing this while you're having sex. You could consider doing this while you're having a shit, while you're breathing, while you're eating, while you're thinking. Because it's a structure. It's all it is. It's not an effort. It's not something you have to make. It's simply a structure. Until it becomes just simply something that is there. And if for you that is possible, that it should make itself and you should make it there and it should be a place where you can come to, then it has some small advantages. And the small advantages is that there's a place to come to no matter how difficult the process of awakening gets. And it does. The process of awakening is wonderful. It's extraordinary. But for the body, it's very, very difficult. And so sometimes you need a place, even with your body so upset, and even with your mind so busy, and even with you so crazed by thoughts, you need another place. And if this can be your place, then this is a useful exercise. If not, dispel it, throw it away, don't use it. Just give it a try, see what you think. Om, It may be too early for any of you to say, but if there's anything you want to say or ask about that.
That's probably one of the most important teachings I've had in a long time. I think it's wonderful. And there seems to be something missing in the next step, maybe, in terms of how it connects with the heart.
Yes. Well, let me do a really quick what happens, the next practice, the next formal practice from that is that let's see, how can I say this? If we were to imagine that what we did was to make the centre of the onion as a self, then the next piece that needs to happen, we're going to dissolve the self, right, in the end. Now, the only place we can dissolve the self into, really, at first, from our point of view, is love. From the larger point of view, is to nothing. But we ain't going to go to nothing. We've had too much of close to nothing, because feeling like you don't have a self is too horrible. So if you build a self first, the next thing you do is dissolve it into love. Now that's the next part. But if you don't have the self, then there's no point in love. There's nothing for love. And the next higher practice is that we start to vibrate that place, that island, if you like, and we do practices around the heart, and then we have the heart drop tiny little emerita onto the island, and it drops down onto the island. And what you basically do is begin to turn the self into just an island, but into a more sophisticated, loving, compassionate being by just dropping these little drops. And it's very beautiful. But if you don't got that first, you also have to do some practice to hold the heart first too. You can't just drop your heart down there, it'll be messy.
You said earlier that Buddhists like gay men are subversive. What do you mean by that?
Well, because order is on the outside rings of everything, right? And Buddhism is so much about the inside that the outsides don't matter in the same way as they do for other people who believe the outside's everything. So because for us the experience arises from within, we keep shattering or changing those cycles. And that's against the rules. What we're supposed to be doing is making these rings proper, better, more like everybody else, So that's a subversive act. That itself is subversive to a culture that's trying to define itself as this. And we're not interested in that. We're interested in, if you're going to be this, where is that supported from here? And if it's not supported from here, then it needs to change. Another way of saying it is we're into change. All the time we're into change. And cultures are not.
We have time for one last question.
In the initial practice, though, the focus remains there, or does it rise?
In this exercise,
or something, it will be done without your.
No, in this exercise you do this particular practice. Now many of you already have islands and you'll get immediately bored with this practice. Who gives a damn? You got one, you don't care. So when that happens, it happens. It just goes away. It's gone. But in this practice, because it's the practice of making the island, you stay there and you do it over and over again until you forget it, it forgets you, you can't do it, you can't be bothered, whatever. Gone. We're not interested, really. Once we have made a self, we're not so interested in it. We want, as it's natural, the first thing is, so what do I do with this? And love is often the next question. Yeah, now what? But for many people who haven't actually built the island at all, so much else of what they do is useless. There's no place to put it all. There's no home.
interesting. On the Western Esoterica, you build the island in the heart.
Tibetan Buddhism, you build it in the heart. And I just think that gay men ain't going to do that.
Yeah.
We ain't going to do that. We're going to build it in our crotch. I could be wrong about that.
No.
We'll see.
So this practice is an adaptation of your own?
Yeah.
Not field tested?
Not field tested? Well, I'm your field test. Now you're the field test. Yeah. Right. Field tested. Thanks.
Thank you very much for holding it for this. And do we have a host this morning? Okay. I guess we'll sort of be our own hosts then. They're going to be, there's Steve, and I guess no goodies, but we do volunteer hosts. So if anyone's interested in doing that, please see me. Person will be. If you have tea, please wash out your cup. There's a Dana bowl. Please remember to give generously. We need Dana for important expenses supporting the work of GBF. Other announcements, brief and pertinent.
There's upcoming speakers. Speakers like Tony would enhance the experience of being a part of GBF. It's great to have you here. Next week there will not be a speaker. There will be open discussion, but the week after that will be the first week of the month, and Jim Wilson will give his talk. It was always great. And the week after that will be Wes Nisker. He's quite a shining light in the Spirit Rock community. He's a wonderful speaker. I'm looking forward to that a lot, and I encourage people to attend all these folks.
Okay. Other announcements?
Yes, my name is Jim Stewart. I'm really sorry to not been able to be here, but I was setting up the picnic for the Inland Spiritual Retreat to which you are all invited, and these are directions. There's another fraternal group of gay men supporting each other in their spiritual path, and you're all welcome. And I have to go back now. So, these will be out on the table. All right, thanks.
Thanks. I guess the only other thing is the group of people sometimes get together for lunch, and Cynthia will be going to the GMS potluck.
I understand there's a mailing party next week. So. Now, I wanted to ask Tony if you wanted to mention Sogo Rinpoche's talk.
Two things. Yeah, Sogo Rinpoche is supposed to be at Rigpa on Monday night, which is down near Union Square. Sogo Rinpoche? Rigpa, R-I-G-P-A. You can look it up in the phone book. It's down near Union Square. His Holiness the Drukchen, who is the head of the Drukpa Kagus, will be here the first week of December for a teaching weekend, and anyone who's interested in that can ask and call me and when I know more. That's all I know so far. So I may not be back here before then.
So with that, I will do my best for the dedication, Mayor. Or do you want to get rid of
did you want to say that there's going to be a discussion about GBF's past, present, and future?
Is that next week what we're doing?
You were going to host that.
Yeah, but I don't know when.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've been asked and agreed to host it something or facilitate a discussion of where we are, where we've been, where we're going. But I don't know the date yet, so as soon as we figure that out.
Do you want that? I'm supposed to write a paper on the hosting. Do you want that and have a discussion? Do you want that next week?
I won't be here next week. Why don't we talk after? Okay, in a minute. We'll figure that out. Okay. So, I'll do the dedication. By the power of truth of these practices, may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings know happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be connected with the source of divine joy. May all beings dwell in equanimity without too much aversion or attachment. And may all beings dwell in equanimity, believing in the equality of all that lives.
That's very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.